Silence. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? We live in a world where speaking up is celebrated, where voicing your opinion, making yourself heard, and standing out are often seen as markers of strength. And yes, there's a time for that. But today I want to talk about the other side of the coin, the quieter side. The moments where staying silent isn't weakness but wisdom. Let me take you back to a meeting I once observed senior leaders, highly intelligent people, all gathered to make a crucial decision. Emotions were high. The stakes were even higher. One man sat there listening. Not a word for 45 minutes. People assumed he had nothing to contribute. But then, when the noise died down, he spoke. Just one sentence. And it reframed the entire conversation. Not because he was louder, but because he waited until the noise cleared. Until emotions cooled. Until the moment was right. There are moments in life where silence is not an absence. It's a presence. So when should we stay silent? 1. When emotions are running high. In the heat of conflict, our brain is wired to defend, not to understand. Silence in that moment doesn't mean you've surrendered. It means you're giving space for clarity, for empathy, for logic to return. Words said in anger rarely solve problems. But silence can diffuse them. We want to comfort. We want to fix. But sometimes the best thing we can do is simply sit with them. Be there, say nothing. Let them know I see you, I'm here. Silence in that moment is love without condition. In a world that constantly demands our voice, our opinion, our reaction, choosing to stay silent can often be misinterpreted as weakness. We're taught from a young age to speak up, to assert ourselves, to make our presence known. Social media amplifies this culture, rewarding hot takes, fast replies, and bold opinions. But in this race to be heard, we often overlook the power of silence, not as a void, not as indecision, but as a conscious, strategic act. Silence is one of the most underestimated tools in communication and leadership. It's not the absence of thought or courage, it's the presence of self-control. Choosing not to speak in certain moments is not about lacking something to say. It's about knowing that. Saying something right now may not serve the moment, the relationship, or the greater goal. Think about a heated argument. Most of us in such moments feel an overwhelming urge to respond immediately and with force. We want to correct the other person, defend ourselves, prove a point. But that immediate response is usually driven more by emotion than logic. That's when silence becomes a strategy. It gives us space to breathe, to assess, and to re-enter the conversation from a place of clarity rather than chaos. In high-stakes environments, boardrooms, negotiations, crisis management, those who wield silence well are often the ones who carry the most influence. They don't interrupt. They don't speak just to fill space. They observe, they listen. And when they do speak, every word is intentional. People lean in because their silence has already created presence. It has built anticipation. And that's the paradox. When used wisely, silence doesn't diminish your voice, it amplifies it. There's also a psychological edge to strategic silence. In conversations, especially challenging ones, a moment of silence after a question or comment often invites others to reflect more deeply, to reveal more, or even to reconsider their own stance. It can subtly shift the balance of power, not through aggression, but through poise. But the power of silence isn't just external. It's internal too. It gives us a chance to hear ourselves. In silence, we become aware of our impulses, our biases, our fears. It's in those quiet moments that we can ask ourselves, is what I'm about to say helpful? Is it necessary? Is it true? Silence gives us the margin we need to align our words with our values. This is especially true in leadership. A leader who rushes to respond, who speaks over others, or who reacts emotionally is often perceived as impulsive or insecure. But a leader who listens deeply, who pauses before answering, and who knows when to stay quiet earns trust. They project calm, discipline, and wisdom. Their silence communicates, I don't need to prove myself. I'm here to understand. Of course, silence can be misused, weaponized to avoid accountability or manipulate. But when practiced with integrity and self-awareness, it becomes one of the most powerful forms of communication. It creates space for empathy, for truth, for transformation. So no, silence is not weakness. It's not indecision. It's not avoidance. When chosen deliberately, it is courage in its most composed form. In the moments that matter most, when emotions rise, when tensions peak, when words can wound more than heal, silence is not what happens when you have nothing to say. It's what happens when you have the wisdom to wait. When emotions are running high, our natural instinct is to react. Anger demands an outlet. Frustration seeks a target, and fear pushes us to protect ourselves, often with words. In the heat of the moment, silence can feel unnatural, even unbearable. We want to speak, to defend, to make ourselves heard. But those are often the moments when silence is most necessary and most powerful. Emotions are not the enemy. They are signals, messengers of what matters to us. But when we let them control our response, especially in conversations or conflicts, we risk saying things we don't mean or making decisions we later regret. Emotional outbursts can burn bridges in seconds that took years to build. Silence in these moments isn't about suppression. It's about pausing long enough to process. It's about giving our rational mind time to catch up with our emotional state. In many arguments, whether personal or professional, the most damaging words aren't the ones said after long thought. They're the ones said in haste, in heat, in hurt. A sarcastic comment, a cruel jab, a dismissive remark, these may provide temporary relief, a moment of superiority or release. But the impact they leave behind can be long-lasting. Silence, on the other hand, creates space. Space to calm down, space to reflect, space to understand not just what we're feeling, but why we're feeling it. When someone says something that offends or frustrates us, silence can be the difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is immediate, driven by emotion. Responding is deliberate, driven by intention. Silence helps us move from one to the other. It's not weakness to take a breath before speaking its wisdom. It shows maturity, self-awareness, and respect for the other person in the relationship. There's a powerful psychological effect that silence has in emotional situations. It slows everything down. It creates a moment of stillness in the middle of chaos. In that stillness, people often become more aware of their own behavior. If someone is yelling and the other person remains calm and quiet, it becomes harder to justify the yelling. Silence can disarm aggression without confrontation. It can turn a potential fight into a thoughtful conversation. Silence is also a form of emotional regulation. When we stay quiet during intense emotional spikes, we are actively choosing not to let the emotion speak for us. We're not denying the feeling, we're just choosing not to give it full control. That is a sign of strength, not submission. In fact, those who can remain silent and composed under pressure are often seen as more grounded, more trustworthy, and more capable of leadership. In relationships, whether with colleagues, friends, or loved ones, choosing silence in an emotional moment can protect the connection. It says, I care more about getting this right than about being right. It gives both parties the chance to cool down and return to the issue with clearer minds and calmer hearts. That doesn't mean you never speak up. It means you speak up when your words are most likely to help, not harm. Over time, practicing silence when emotions are high trains our emotional intelligence. We become less reactive, more thoughtful, and more in control of our responses. And the more we do it, the more natural it becomes. We stop seeing silence as absence and start seeing it as presence, our way of choosing clarity over chaos, understanding over impulse. In the end, staying silent when emotions are high isn't about retreating. It's about rising above the immediate and choosing the long-term good. It's not silence out of fear. It's silence out of strength, out when someone we care about is grieving or in pain. Our first instinct is to say something to offer comfort, encouragement, or wisdom. We want to help. We want to make it better. But in truth, there are moments in life when words fall short. No phrase can undo loss. No sentence can erase pain. And often, the more we try to speak, the more distant we feel from the person who is suffering. That's because in those moments, they don't need our words. They need our presence. They need our silence. Silence in times of grief or pain is not emptiness. It is presence without pressure. It's the kind of presence that says, I am here with you, without demanding conversation or resolution. When someone is hurting deeply, their world has changed. Their emotions are raw, often overwhelming. To fill that space too quickly with talk, no matter how well-meaning, can unintentionally feel dismissive or intrusive. Sometimes even phrases like they're in a better place or everything happens for a reason do more harm than good. These are attempts to ease discomfort, not just theirs, but our own. But when we sit in silence with someone in pain, we're saying something deeper that we're willing to share in their sorrow, even if we can't fix it. That we honor their experience enough not to rush it or cover it up. That we're comfortable enough to simply be present in their discomfort. That's a powerful gift. Think of the times in your own life when you were deeply hurting. Did words help? Maybe a few. But what likely made the biggest difference were the people who didn't try to solve your pain. The ones who just showed up. The friend who sat beside you on the couch and didn't try to make you talk. The coworker who left a note that said, no words, just thinking of you. The parent who simply hugged you and let you cry. In those moments, silence becomes more than absence. It becomes connection. It communicates care in its purest form. It removes the burden from the grieving person to perform, to explain, or to reassure others that they're okay. It gives them space to feel what they're feeling without interruption. Silence also shows respect. It respects the gravity of the situation. It recognizes that some experiences are too profound for quick answers or tidy conclusions. It allows the grieving person to lead, whether they want to talk, cry, sit quietly, or just be in someone's presence. It puts them at the center, not us. This is especially important because grief has no script. Everyone experiences it differently. Some people want to talk immediately. Others don't. Some will cry openly, others will hold it in. When we meet that variety with silence, we're giving people the freedom to grieve their own way. We're not steering the experience, we're accompanying them through it. Of course, silence doesn't mean doing nothing. It means being attentive without being intrusive. It means being ready to listen if they speak, to hold their hand if they reach for it, to sit for hours if needed. It's a quiet but powerful presence that says, you're not alone. In a society that often feels compelled to speak, especially in uncomfortable moments, learning to stay silent in times of grief or pain takes emotional courage. But it is one of the most compassionate acts we can offer. Because ultimately, people may not remember what we said, but they will always remember how we made them feel. And in the face of sorrow, the feeling of being seen, heard, and quietly supported speaks louder than any words ever could. In a culture that values quick answers and instant expertise, admitting that you don't know something can feel like failure. We're rewarded for confidence, praised for certainty, and often judged by how fast we can respond. But the truth is, no one knows everything. And pretending to know when we don't is not only dishonest, it's counterproductive. The ability to pause, to reflect silently, and to acknowledge the limits of our knowledge is not a sign of incompetence. It's a mark of wisdom. There's a quiet strength in saying, I don't know. It's an act of humility, and more importantly, an act of responsibility. Rather than contributing noise to a conversation or offering misleading guidance, it allows space for truth to emerge. Silence in that moment becomes a tool, a way to listen, to observe, to learn before we speak. It shows that we care more about getting it right than about appearing right. Too often people feel pressured to speak just to fill the silence. In meetings, classrooms, or even casual discussions, there's an unspoken discomfort around not having an immediate answer. That discomfort leads us to guess, to bluff, to offer half-truths dressed up as insights. But those moments can erode trust over time. People may nod in the moment, but they remember when your confidence didn't match reality. They remember when your answer misled rather than clarified. On the other hand, when someone admits uncertainty and takes time to think or investigate before responding, they gain credibility. Why? Because people value honesty. They respect someone who isn't trying to impress, but trying to understand. That kind of integrity builds deeper relationships, whether in leadership, teaching, friendship, or business. Silence also gives our minds time to process. The first thought is rarely the best one. When we pause, even for a few seconds, we give ourselves room to connect ideas, to question assumptions, and to clarify what we're really trying to say. That reflection leads to better communication, not just more communication. This becomes especially important in high-stakes environments. Leaders, for example, are often expected to have answers, but the best leaders know that they don't need to speak on every issue immediately. They gather information, they consult others, they reflect in silence before responding. This doesn't make them look weak, it makes them appear thoughtful, deliberate, and trustworthy. The same principle applies in our personal lives. In conversations with loved ones, not knowing what to say can feel uncomfortable, especially when emotions are involved. But filling that space with forced advice or uncertain reassurances often misses the mark. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is, I don't know what to say right now, but I'm here. And I'm thinking. That honesty connects far more deeply than empty words ever could. There is also a freedom in admitting what we don't know. It releases us from the pressure of pretending. It opens us up to learning, to growth, to collaboration. When we stay silent and reflect, we often discover better questions, more thoughtful responses, or even the humility to ask someone else for input. That creates a culture where curiosity thrives and where authenticity is valued. In the end, we must shift our mindset. Knowing everything isn't the goal. The real goal is understanding, clarity, and connection. And sometimes the path to those things starts with silence, a pause to gather our thoughts, a moment to reflect on our limits, and the courage to say, let me think about that. It's not a step back. It's a step towards something deeper. There's a quiet kind of leadership that doesn't come from commanding attention, dominating conversations, or always being the first to speak. It comes from restraint, from intentional listening, from knowing when to step back so someone else can step forward. In a world that often equates visibility with value, it's easy to forget the power of staying quiet not as an act of withdrawal, but as a way to create space for others to be seen, heard, and empowered. When we stay quiet, we make room. Room for others to express their ideas. Room for people who are often overshadowed. Room for those who are still finding their voice. And that space can be transformative, because not everyone has the confidence to interrupt. Not everyone feels invited into the spotlight. Silence, used wisely, becomes that invitation. It communicates, your voice matters, I'm listening. You have the floor. This is especially important in group settings. In meetings or collaborative discussions, there's often an unspoken competition for airtime. People rush to contribute, sometimes more concerned with being heard than with listening. But when someone intentionally stays quiet, not because they have nothing to say, but because they want to hear what others think, it shifts the dynamic. It shows that contribution isn't measured only by speaking. It's also measured by how well we listen, how generously we create room for diverse perspectives. And it's not just about what we say, it's about how we respond. When someone shares an idea or a story, silence can show that we're truly taking it in. A thoughtful pause before responding often speaks louder than a rushed reply. It signals respect. It shows we value what's being said enough to let it land before we react. That silence gives weight to others' words. For leaders, this is especially crucial. Leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about creating an environment where the best ideas can surface. And often, those ideas come from unexpected voices that only emerge when there's space and safety. When a leader stays quiet and listens deeply and resists the urge to immediately fill every silence, they foster a culture of inclusion. People begin to believe what I say matters. I don't have to shout to be heard here. Silence can also help correct power imbalances. In conversations between people of different levels of authority, experience, or confidence, the louder voice often dominates. But when the person with more power chooses silence, they equalize the space. They show that they are not above listening, and they demonstrate that wisdom isn't always in speaking, but often in making room for others to contribute. Even outside of professional settings, this principle holds true. In friendships, families, and communities, silence can be a gift. It tells the other person, I don't need to fix this. I don't need to interrupt. I'm here with you. Speak when you're ready. That kind of presence builds trust and deepens relationships. It says without words that we are here not to dominate but to support. Staying quiet isn't about holding back your value. It's about recognizing that sometimes your greatest value is in your ability to lift others up, to be the person who listens when no one else does, to be the one who notices the quieter voices and gives them space to rise. It's a different kind of influence, subtle but deeply impactful. In the end, creating space for others by staying quiet is an act of generosity. It's a choice to center someone else's voice instead of your own. It's a sign of confidence, humility, and emotional intelligence. And in a world full of noise, that kind of quiet leadership is not just rare, it's necessary. There are moments in life when we are hurt, misunderstood, or provoked when the sting of someone else's words or actions tempts us to strike back with our own. The impulse to retaliate is deeply human. It feels justified, even necessary. We want to defend ourselves, to assert our worth, to make the other person feel what we're feeling. But in those moments, choosing silence over harmful words can be one of the most powerful and courageous decisions we make. Words carry weight. Once spoken, they cannot be taken back. They can build up, but they can just as easily break down. A harsh comment said in anger may last only seconds, but its impact can linger for years. It can alter a relationship, damage trust, or plant seeds of resentment that never fully disappear. And yet, when emotions run high, we often underestimate the harm our words can cause. We focus on how they will make us feel in the moment, not on the damage they might leave behind. Choosing silence doesn't mean ignoring injustice or avoiding important conversations. It means pausing long enough to ask yourself, will what I'm about to say help or hurt? Will it bring clarity or create more confusion? Will it move things forward or take us further apart? That pause, that moment of silence is where self-control lives. It's where maturity takes root. It's where we trade short-term satisfaction for long-term peace. Often the most damaging words aren't loud or obvious. They're subtle. They're spoken with sarcasm, with judgment, with passive aggression. They may feel clever or deserved in the moment, but they corrode the foundation of our relationships. Choosing not to speak those words isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the strength to say, I won't let anger speak for me. I won't let pain become a weapon. Silence also gives us the space to reflect. It slows down the emotional momentum and creates a buffer between impulse and action. In that space, we can regain perspective. We can ask ourselves what really matters, being right or being kind, expressing pain or inflicting it. And most of the time, once the heat is passed, we're grateful we didn't say what we first wanted to. In conflict, silence can also diffuse tension. When one person chooses not to engage in the escalation, it disrupts the pattern. It can disarm the other person not with power, but with restraint. It shows emotional intelligence. It sets a tone. It demonstrates that peace is more important than winning. But silence isn't just about restraint, it's also about intention. Sometimes choosing not to speak is a way of honoring the relationship. It's a way of saying, you matter more to me than this argument. Our connection is more important than being right in this moment. That kind of silence is not passive. It's deeply active. It's an offering of grace. Of course, there are times when silence can be misinterpreted when people assume it means agreement or indifference. That's why it matters how we follow up. Choosing silence in a heated moment doesn't mean avoiding the conversation altogether. It means returning to it later with a calmer mind and a clearer heart. It means saying, I needed time to think. I didn't want to speak from anger. Now I'm ready to talk. In a world where reaction is often instant and words are thrown like weapons, the decision to hold your tongue can feel radical. But it is one of the most impactful choices we can make. It protects our integrity, preserves our relationships, and allows us to lead with compassion instead of ego. Silence, when chosen over harmful words, is not the absence of expression, it is the presence of wisdom.